They laughed. That part is important to say plainly, because the laughing was not a little thing. It was the full sound of a room of grown men who had just heard something so far outside their understanding that the only available response was noise. Donna Vess was 15 years old, standing in the gravel lot of Holcomb Brothers Farm Supply outside of Clarinda, Iowa, Page County, on a Thursday afternoon in late October of 2003, and she had just asked Ray Holcomb if she could have his blown engine blocks. The ones in the pile behind the shop. The ones nobody wanted. Ray Holcomb laughed. The two men with him laughed. A parts driver from a dealer in Shenandoah who happened to be standing nearby laughed, and he didn't even know what had been said. He just heard the laughing and joined in, the way a person does. Donna waited. She was used to waiting. "They're yours," Ray said, once he could say anything at all. "Every last one." He meant it as a joke, with a punchline he'd never have to pay out. 12 cracked and seized and rod-knocked engine blocks stacked behind a farm implement shop are worth approximately nothing to the people who put them there. Getting rid of them, if anything, costs money. A 15-year-old girl asking for them was funny the way a child asking for a bag of gravel is funny. Harmless, slightly baffling. Good for a story later. Ray Holcomb told the story for years. The punchline changed every time he told it. There's something about a person who doesn't have to prove anything, who already knows what they know and is simply going about the work of it. If you know what I mean, you'll know why this story is worth your time. Hit subscribe and stay with us. Dale Fenchurch had been driving his maroon Ford F-250 past Holcomb Brothers on his way home from a job when he saw the girl in the gravel lot. He pulled over, though he could not tell you why. Dale was 58 that year and had spent most of his adult life doing ironwork and light fabrication out of a small shop on his property east of Clarinda. He had done enough work with castings and metal stock over the decades that when he saw a teenager asking for engine blocks, his first thought was not the laughing thought. His first thought was, what does she need those for? He watched from across the road. He saw her load 3 of the blocks into the bed of a rust-orange Chevy C10 pickup. A 1974 model, he thought, though it was hard to tell from the repaint, with a hydraulic lift gate that looked like it had been bolted on by someone who knew what they were doing. She was alone. She worked steadily and without apparent strain, which meant she had moved heavy things before. She drove away. Dale went home. He thought about it at supper. He is the kind of man who thinks about things at supper and does not say much about them. Donna Vess had learned what engine blocks were for from her father, which requires a little explaining because her father, Gerald Vess, had not taught her in the usual sense. Gerald was not a machinist or a fabricator. He had been, for most of Donna's life, a cash crop farmer on 160 acres south of Clarinda. Corn and soybeans, a little wheat in the rotation some years, and he had the specific kind of mechanical knowledge that comes from keeping old equipment running past its intended life on a budget that didn't allow for new parts. He knew how to make do. He was, Donna said later, the best problem solver she had ever seen in person, and he solved problems the way a quiet man does, by looking at them from 4 directions before touching anything, by studying what he had on hand rather than what he wished he had, and by keeping records of what worked and what didn't in a log he maintained in the shop. The log was a 3-ring binder, worn through on the spine, full of penciled sketches and notes in Gerald's handwriting that you needed to know Gerald to decode. He had taught Donna to read cast iron by feel and by sound. A cracked block rings hollow. A sound one gives you a clean bell tone when you tap it right. He had shown her the difference between a block that's seized because of neglect and one that's cracked through the water jacket, which is a different kind of problem altogether. This was not formal instruction. It was Gerald standing next to something and talking out loud while he worked, the way farmers do, and Donna paying attention, the way she did with most things. He died in March of 2002. She was 13. What she had by then was the knowledge and the 3-ring binder and a 74 C10 with a hydraulic gate that Gerald had installed himself, which she had learned to drive on the back roads at 11 and maintained herself since he died. What she did not have was much money, which was a circumstance rather than a complaint. She and her mother managed the farm through a neighbor doing custom fieldwork, but a 160 acres of rented ground in Page County in the early 2000s is not a situation that leaves a lot of margin. Donna had decided, somewhere in the months after her father's death, that she was going to build something she could not yet fully name, but that lived in the intersection of what her father knew and what she could find for free. The engine blocks were the beginning. What she was building, it turned out, was counterweights. This is not an obvious thing, and the reason it's not obvious is that most people do not spend much time thinking about what makes a loader tractor stable under a heavy front load. The short version is, when you put 2,000 pounds of bale or bucket on the front of a tractor, the back end wants to come up. And the way you counteract that is with weight behind the rear axle. Ballast. Cast iron is dense, cheap in the right circumstances, and weathers outdoors without deteriorating in any way that matters. Donna had read about aftermarket ballast boxes and suitcase weights in an equipment catalog and looked at the prices and thought, I can make those. Her father's binder had 3 pages on casting dimensions for counterweight applications, which Gerald had apparently looked into at some point and never pursued. She pursued it. She built her first counterweight set in the winter of 2003 out of a cracked 350 Chevy block she'd gotten from Holcomb Brothers, and a frame she welded from scrap angle iron she'd bought by the pound from a salvage yard in Red Oak, Iowa. The weld work was not pretty. She knew that. She had taught herself to weld from a library book and Gerald's old Lincoln Arc welder, which she'd kept running with 2 rebuilt electrode holders and a ground clamp she'd fabricated herself from copper plate. The first counterweights were ugly. They were also exactly as heavy as she calculated and bolted to the 3-point hitch of the neighbor's John Deere 4440 with no modification. The neighbor, a man named Bud Osterman, who farmed about 600 acres across 3 townships, had let her try them because he liked Gerald and because he was not going to lose much if they didn't work. They worked. Bud's loader tractor stopped walking the back tires off the ground on heavy bale work. The rear-wheel traction on the 4440 with a full bucket improved in a way Bud said he could feel through the seat. He told 2 other producers in his coffee group. One of them called Donna directly. She was 15 years old and had her first customer, not counting Bud, who hadn't paid her yet because there had been no arrangement about payment. She had just shown up with the counterweights and asked if she could try them. Bud paid her. He paid her $180 for the set, which was more than she'd asked. She told him $140, and he said $180, and that was the end of that conversation. She went back to Ray Holcomb's lot in November. This time she asked for the remaining 9 blocks, which Ray had not moved and had not expected to move, and had no particular feeling about. He waved her toward the pile. She loaded all 9 over the course of 2 trips. Ray watched her from inside the shop the second time, through the window, without saying anything. He had stopped laughing by then. He wasn't sure when. Dale Fenchurch saw the C10 in Holcomb's lot again on the second trip, and this time pulled in. He introduced himself. Donna told him what she was doing. He asked to see the counterweight setup on Bud Osterman's tractor, which Bud agreed to, and Dale stood in Bud's equipment shed for 20 minutes, looking at the mounting and the weld work and the fit. He said two things. He said the welds would hold, but she should grind her starts cleaner. He said the mounting bracket needed a gusset at the lower left corner under heavy torque load, and he showed her where on the bracket with one finger. She went home and added the gusset. She did not ask Dale why he cared. He didn't know why, exactly. He just felt like he ought to say something. Dale Fenchurch became something between a technical advisor and a customer over the following 2 years. He bought 2 sets of counterweights from her for his own equipment, a Case 85240 and an older Allis-Chalmers 7040, and on 3 separate occasions looked at a design problem she was working through and offered a thought. Not instructions. A thought. There is a difference, and Donna would have told you so. By the time she turned 17, in the spring of 2005, she had sold counterweight sets to 11 producers in Page and Montgomery counties. The pricing had evolved. A standard set for a Category 2 3-point hitch ran $195. A Category 3 set was $260. She had moved entirely to engine blocks for the cast material because the density was right, and the supply, it turned out, was not the problem she had expected it to be. Farm implement shops, dealerships, and small engine repair places accumulate blown blocks steadily, and most of them are quietly grateful to have someone take them. She was collecting material she could not use fast enough to use it. The math on her second full year, 2004, age 15 turning 16, was $2,140 in gross sales on counterweight sets, minus roughly $310 in materials, welding supplies, and hardware. She had no shop rent because she worked in the same building her father had worked in, which was her mother's. Net for the year was somewhere around $1,830, which for a 15-year-old in Page County, Iowa, in 2004, was not small money. By 2007, she was 19, and the business had grown past what one person working part-time could manage. She was taking agricultural science courses at Iowa Western Community College in Council Bluffs, and building counterweights on evenings and weekends and some mornings before class. She had added a small line of custom ballast boxes, welded steel, filled with concrete, priced below the name brand catalog options, and was selling them through a verbal agreement with a single implement dealer in Clarinda, who kept a few sets in his shop and called her when he needed more. No contract. No paperwork beyond invoices. This was the way Gerald would have done it, and she knew that without thinking about it much. She is 36 now. The business she started with a request for garbage is called Vest Ballast and Farm Components, and it operates out of a 4,800 square foot fabrication shop on the family property south of Clarinda. She employs 4 people, including 1 full-time welder she hired 3 years ago. The counterweight line has expanded to include custom ballast solutions for skid-steer loaders, compact utility tractors, and 3-point applications across most major equipment brands. A set ships to somewhere in the continental United States about 3 times a week. Ray Holcomb retired from Holcomb Brothers Farm Supply in 2018. He and Donna cross paths at the farm show in Clarinda most years. She told me he is pleasant about it now, which is probably the best you can ask for from a man whose punchline grew a shop. Dale Fenchurch died in 2019. Donna went to the visitation. She stood in line for 40 minutes to get there, which was longer than she'd expected, because Dale was the kind of man who had quietly touched a lot of things in a lot of people's work without making much noise about it. She told his daughter that he had caught a bracket flaw in her 3rd counterweight set that would eventually have failed under load, and that the gusset he'd pointed to had been in every bracket she'd built since 2003. 16 years of brackets. Thousands of them by then. Dale's daughter did not know anything about counterweights, but she understood what Donna was telling her. Gerald Vess never knew his daughter would do any of this. He died when she was 13, and 13-year-olds don't tell you their plans, partly because they don't have them yet. What he gave her was the knowledge and the binder, and the habit of looking at a problem from 4 directions before touching it. He gave her the ability to hear the difference between a cracked block and a sound one. He probably never thought much about what she would do with any of that. He was just talking out loud while he worked, the way farmers do. The binder is in the shop. She still refers to it sometimes, not because she needs to anymore, just because it's his handwriting.